Albert Breer is here with us from SI. We also have Tommy Giles. Are people blowing the Patriots offensive issues out of proportion? Because it is almost, if you take Chris Sims from NBC Sports out of the equation, who had like sort of kind of nice things to say this week, by and large, everyone is calling this an abject disaster.
I think we've seen some of the things that they were doing in the summer actually looked okay early in that game. Like some of the zone running stuff, and I know like everybody thinks like all zone running is just the traditional old Denver Broncos outside zone. There were some zone runs early in the game that actually worked. And so I think you saw some things start to take there. The problem was the way you combat that is through penetration. Once the Dolphins started getting penetration, that's where you started to see the runs getting blown up. And really the one thing that like people miss a lot with the Shanahan run game, it's marrying the passing game to the running game. It's making the defense like think that everything looks exactly the same. And one thing I think you saw a lack of was the marriage between the run game and the pass game, which is such an important foundation piece of what the Shanahan offense
So what was interesting to me was on that opening drive, you saw Mac Jones getting to the line and audibling out of plays a few different times. And it felt like that opening drive, they had a ton of momentum. And that kind of looked like what I hoped it would look like despite what we saw in July and August. Unfortunately, as you got deeper into the game, and I thought they did run the ball pretty well for the entire first quarter, just about. But as you got deeper into the game, it just felt like there was kind of a lack of imagination, of creativity, especially when you're looking at plays like 4th and 3 and 4th and 1.
And there'd definitely be concern there because, you know, you're scripting the early parts of the game.
Right.
When you have to adjust is when the instincts as a play caller come into play.
And this is obviously when we all start second-guessing decisions made. There was a lot of talk in the offseason that Bill O'Brien would have been willing to come back here and be the Patriots' offensive coordinator. But then people said, no, he wanted to stay. It would only be a year. He really wanted to stay in Alabama. What's the story there?
So
why didn't they bring
there are
Bill
a couple
O'Brien
things
back?
that take into play here. Number one, he's got an existing relationship with Mac Jones. Mac actually helped teach him the Alabama offense when he first got there as Mac was preparing for the draft. The second thing is that Bill O'Brien is separated from his family right now because his family stayed in Houston. He's living in Tuscaloosa. And that's not the easiest thing in the world. I think he 100% would have been amenable to coming back here. But it was never going to be Bill O'Brien calling Bill Belichick saying, get me the hell out of here.
So why wouldn't Bill call him?
It had to be, if it was O'Brien, it had to be Bill and Nick are going to work this out on their own. I know if I push it at all, it won't work. And the reason why Bill didn't end up doing that, Bill Belichick didn't wind up doing that, was the fear that if Billy O'Brien came back here, crushed it for a year with Mac Jones, then he would be gone in a year and he would be doing this all over again. I would argue that's a really bad idea not to hire somebody. That's a really bad reason not to hire somebody who's really qualified. You see the Rams have made it work despite a ton of turnover on their coaching staff. I think part of this is Bill Belichick, 70 years old, having had to deal with a lot of turnover over the last 5 years, saying to himself, well, I just want to start building with the same group of people. It's one of the reasons why Elliott Wolf isn't the head of personnel now. Matt Groh is, because there's less fear that Matt Groh is going to leave than there is Elliott Wolf will leave.
It's just, what I find interesting about that, Bert, is that you're talking about Bill O'Brien coming here and crushing it. Like that's the best thing you can hope for, right? If he comes here and he crushes it, he gets the job.
You help Mac Jones' development? No.
And that's the biggest thing right there is it's year 2 of Mac Jones, right? So this would be probably the most important year of his career. So I would think you'd want the best guy available no matter what, even if he's going to be gone.
Yeah, and if the Rams are the model, right? Like think about this. They bring in Brandon Staley in 2020. And Brandon Staley came as this guy. Sean McVay knew when he interviewed Brandon Staley, this guy's going to be head coach probably sooner rather than later. Brandon Staley turns them into the #1 defense in the league. They lose him after a year. He hires Raheem Morris to replace him. What happens? They win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's probably going to lose Raheem now after this year. And you know what?
But you go with the best people for the job, even if it means they're going
and
to
now
lose.
everybody
Something
wants
else
to work
you said
there.
caught my ear. You said Bill O'Brien wanted Bill and Nick to work it out.
On their own.
On their own. Nick Saban.
Yeah.
What about Caley? Nick,
okay.
Because that's where I was like, wait, because that's the other Nick. I was like, hold on, I know I'm not forgetting a Nick here, but there was talk all the time if Bill O'Brien didn't do it, it would be Nick Caley. And you had a really interesting nugget on why Nick Caley didn't sign an extension.
And I do think like the pipeline, like Nick Caley was the next one up in the pipeline. Now, like Josh McDaniels wanted to bring him to Vegas. That was the one guy that Bill basically told Josh, you can't take him with you.
So Nick
was effectively blocked. They went to do an extension with Nick Caley, and I think part of the issue there was Nick Caley's role wasn't made clear to him. And so why would you sign an extension and give up your chance maybe to go to Vegas a year later if they're not making your role clear to you? And so he doesn't sign the extension, and I think then part of the reason why Nick Caley doesn't get more responsibility is because now he could be gone after a year too because he didn't sign the extension.
So Giles, where my brain just can't line it all up is, if you want to block Nick Caley from going to Vegas, why don't you make because what we've heard all along is that Bill Belichick doesn't want guys to leave, but maybe, just maybe, if you make Nick Caley's role clear here and you say you're going to be my offensive coordinator, you have worked under Josh McDaniels wanted to take you, maybe he stays longer and maybe you don't have the turnover and we're not having all the conversations we're having right now.
And I'm also just curious, why couldn't you do with Nick Caley what you've done on the defensive side of the ball, where you haven't named a defensive coordinator for the last couple of years and have Nick Caley be more involved in the offense? Or maybe,
and I think is
it possible that he is?
How awkward is it, too, that Nick Caley's teaching the other coaches the offense now, because that's sort of what went on is, it's really hard to build on something when you don't know what the foundation was, right? And so if you look at the guys that were really involved with building the offense last year, Josh McDaniels in Vegas, Mick Lombardi in Vegas, Carmen Bursillo in Vegas. Nick Caley is the only sort of core piece of the offensive coaching staff that's still there. So if you want to build on what you did last year with your rookie quarterback, you need to have guys putting together the offense who are part of building what you built last year. And part of this whole thing about starting over again is because you've turned over so much of the staff and you didn't empower the one guy who actually was part of building what was here last year.
It just, none of it makes sense. None of it makes any sense to me. Maybe it all ends up working out in the end, but right now it just looks like another bad decision. All right, well, for one reason or another, the Patriots have had a number of staffers leave in recent years. Here's some of the notable names. Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler left this year, Nick Caserio, Jed Fish, Cole Popovich departed in 2021. You got Dante Scarnecchia, Brett Bielema, Austin Fort in 2020. I mean, just look, it's like a laundry list of guys who have come and gone all the way back to 2019. So let's bring in Tom Curran now alongside Albert Breer. Is passing over coaches, we see this turnover, and you see passing over coaches like Billy O'Brien and Nick Caley, Curran. Is that what's best for the team? Bill Belichick always talks about doing what's best for the team, but is that really what's best for the team?
Could be. And that's why I think I'm not nearly as mystified as you as to why Bill might be of this mind. Look, if you look at 2017, he was about to lose Josh McDaniels and Matt Patricia, and all attached coaches to those two individuals. That's part of the reason that he made sure that Josh McDaniels came back. He didn't want to lose both coordinators. He's lost Brian Flores. He's probably on the verge of losing Gerard Mayo. He lost Billy O'Brien way back when. He's lost Dave Ziegler and Monty Austin Fort and Nick Caserio. There's a point at which Bill has probably been rated more than any other coach in NFL history, which is a byproduct of the success that he has fostered here. But at some point, too, the cupboard is bare of coaches, which is why when he spoke to Nick Saban, that was one of the aspects that he highlighted with a frustration. You do well, and then guys want to take people with them. But everybody wants upward mobility, so it's a really hard line to toe, Trenni. But I do understand why Bill would be like, I can't keep doing this every freaking year.
I think it's totally a factor, 100%.
Are guys leaving, Bert, just because they've had success and they have a chance to go somewhere else and do more? Or do they leave because, and we all know this about Bill Belichick, it's sort of the rumor around the league, right, that you're overworked and not paid as well here as you are other places. And it's like after a while, you're like, thanks for the small market, what we call on TV or media, like a small market experience, but I'm going to go make some real money somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's sort of case by case. I think it'd be wrong to make a blanket statement that everything is related to one thing. I don't think that's what it is here. I do think it existed on the scouting side where there were a lot of people that worked over there and personnel that felt like they weren't being listened to. And I've mentioned this before where the N'Keal Harry draft pick was seen as sort of a flashpoint in scouting, where so many people inside the scouting department had tried to point Bill Belichick to A.J. Brown, to Deebo Samuel, and he wound up blowing through stop signs on N'Keal Harry and took him. And that was sort of seen as the last straw for some people on the scouting side. And they'd already lost some people on that side. But I do think that there was an element over there of people not feeling they were being listened to. On the coaching side, I don't think it's as much of a blanket thing. Like, I think these really are case by case. In some cases, it's just a promotion somewhere else and more responsibility. In some cases, it's money. I think there's a lot more variance when it comes to why coaches are leaving here.
Tom, should Bill Belichick?
I would say,
go
too,
ahead.
if I-
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I would just say this relative to the notion of, and I know you're just throwing it out there as a metaphor, but the trade-off for a small market salary that you're mentioning, which is fair, and the hours being exorbitant, is that you're basically at Oxford. And you're a Rhodes Scholar in football. And these individuals are then coveted around the league in a way that when you spawn from another organization, you may not be. So what you don't get in your paycheck and what you don't get in terms of quality of life, the trade-off is supposed to be for coaches and staffers, the opportunity to say, but I came up with the Patriots. And it has worked for oodles of individuals.
Bill's made a lot of millionaires, no question.
Yeah, if things, though, the way, if we're being honest, though, when guys have left here to go be head coaches elsewhere, they haven't always had success. Has that changed things at all, Bert, for guys, where this is not, sort of now without Tom Brady, how it's not seen as a shoe-in for a Super Bowl? Is it no longer seen as the Oxford of football?
Well, I think everything's changed as far as that goes. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is as attractive a landing spot for coaches as it was 5 or 10 years ago. That's Los Angeles now. That's San Francisco now. So, I think that, if you're a young coach coming up, maybe there'd be less of a willingness to take less money, to work more hours, to work here than there was 5 or 10 years ago when this was sort of the capital of pro football. And it's not anymore. And that's the reality of it. And it's been now 4 years since the Patriots won a Super Bowl. A lot of the coaches that won Super Bowls here are gone now. There are very few players on the roster that have a ring that was won here. So, yeah, there's no question that it's not quite what it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Certainly could change, though, obviously, if Josh McDaniels has a ton of success in Vegas and looking like, hey, coming back, doing it again and getting your feet wet puts you in a better position.